Welcome to Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. We're back with another edition of Avalara's webinar series discussing the Trump administration's tariffs and their impact on trade compliance. We started this weekly series back in February, so if this is your first time, welcome. If you've joined us before, welcome back. Just a friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review. We are recording today's event and you'll receive the recording later today. The console you're looking at can be customized. Feel free to move or resize the windows. The additional resources section contains a lot of great related resources, including the slide deck. There are several ways to engage with the presenters and attendees. First, if you have any questions, please submit them using the Ask a Question box. We'll save time for a Q&A at the end of the presentation. You may also submit troubleshooting questions there. Second, you can join our attendee chat. Click the icon at the bottom of your screen with 2 chat bubbles. The attendee chat will appear. We encourage you to introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. Third, you can react to the presentation by clicking on the emoji icon and reacting. Last, today's webinar series on with the 45-minute format to have more audience Q&A, since this session is less than an hour and intended to be interactive and responsive. It is not eligible for CPE credit. Avalara's customer conference, Crush, is going on tour, and our own Shane will be there in person. We have a couple of dates that are confirmed. We have Chicago, June 18th, and New York City, June 26th. We also have Atlanta and Dallas dates coming soon. All right, let's meet our presenters. We have both from Avalara today, Patrick Frith, Senior Director of Growth, Cross-Border. Excuse me, I moved on too fast. And of course, Shane Bogdan. And Shane is our Director of Sales, Cross-Border. All right, I'm gonna pass it over to Patrick to get started.
Thank you very much. And hello again, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is our first one in June. We are 5 weeks away from the tariff pause, which is expected to be lifted, the reciprocals, if you remember. So we're getting closer and closer. We're going to have a look at the latest news in trade compliance. We're going to run through that, what's hit the headlines since last week, implications to your business, methods in which you can take action with Avalara, and then of course we'll round it up. Shane and I will round it up with Q&A. We'll get to as many questions as we can as you start sending them in to us, submitting them to us in the Q&A chat box. So without further ado, Shane, we're going to go on to the first poll question.
Yeah, perfect. So, and Patrick, great to be back. You and I were both traveling last week, so good to be back on these. But poll question number 1 here, it's going to be a theme throughout today's content. Based on the ruling from the Court of International Trade last week, what distinct U.S. trade measure exceeded authority granted to the president, again, as deemed by the Court of International Trade? So let me move this to the poll section. So, yeah, Patrick, I think, you know, quite a tumultuous 48 hours last week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, in terms of the news that was kind of hitting in relation to pauses, stops, pauses, etc. Well, I know we'll go through it on here, but
that's right. Legal action and then no legal action. Yeah, it's just when you think it's going to get quiet for the week, it comes in a flurry.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, let's see if everybody's been keeping up on these pieces. And if you don't know the verbiage or the definitions on these, we'll be going through those later. So, okay, Section 232 at around 11%, IEPA taking the lead, which is the correct answer. Section 301 at 25%, and Section 321 at 6%. So good. I'm glad we're going to be covering this, these definitions, and why these are so much in the news. And we probably should have done this earlier in our content throughout the year, but today we'll be breaking down each of these. But the correct answer is IEPA, and basically the Court of International Trade said it exceeded any authority granted to a president to regulate imports by means of tariffs. So again, we'll go into that. But Patrick, before we do, can you just kind of catch us up here in relation to where we're currently at right now, the Liberation Day pauses, etc.?
Right. So that's right. So everybody remembers this slide. Those who've been on the webinar before, you'll remember this slide. This is This was the 2nd of April, the Rose Garden press announcement, where we had the reciprocal tariffs for 59 countries. We're not showing all 59 here. If you click the link when you get the deck afterwards, you can see all those countries. But the main ones we're showing right here in the orange, dark yellow orange boxes. So that is what the US is expected to apply to the countries listed on the 9th of July. As I mentioned earlier on, we're 5 weeks away from that deadline. So it was a 3-month pause. Here we are 5 weeks away. We would expect a flurry of trade deals to be done, but it's a little quiet on that front. We know that the UK has been in and out of the White House, a couple of other countries as well. The EU are still going backwards and forwards. Apparently, the current administration is not happy with the progress with the EU. That's a big trading bloc. That's a big partner. So we have to watch that very closely. A lot of the goods that we consume here in the US come from the EU. So we're going to have to watch that one over the next 5 weeks or so. So we have that 90-day pause coming to an end in 5 weeks on the 9th of July. And don't forget, concurrently, we have the China pause, which is currently in motion. It's a 3-month pause, but it finishes later. It finishes towards the end of July. So we've got those two pauses which are running concurrently. And that's pretty much where we stand. We're waiting for deals to be done. Shane?
Yeah, no. So let's talk about what happened last week. Again, we all thought we were kind of sitting in this 90-day pause area here, but not so much. So if you've been following our webinar the past few weeks, I think on May 12th, right before May 12th, we mentioned that the Court of International Trade had basically a case in front of them, talking about, I believe it was 12 states, a couple other businesses, in relation to saying that these IEEPA tariffs were basically unfair. And the ruling came out on May 28th, and basically it said that the court held that the retaliatory tariffs exceeded any authority granted to a president to regulate importation by means of tariffs, and that was specifically on China, Canada, and Mexico, as well as the other countries. So, the news wires were kind of going crazy. The market was going up because it was basically saying, well, they have 7 days. The court basically said you have, 10 calendar days until June 7th to revoke these things, be declared invalid, and bring those 10% and all these other tariffs down. Well, I think we've been following this enough, knowing that when there's one ruling, there's something else right behind it. And whatever is going to be in the press and whatever is being announced, there's going to be something right behind it. So let me walk you through here. So then on May 28th, they issued the order on the IEEPA tariffs, basically revoked, and that the government had 10 days to remove the order. The government, as in the Trump administration, then filed a motion then on the 29th with the Court of Appeals, basically stating that that they need 7 days to allow for any sort of Supreme Court, to make any motion with the Supreme Court decision. The Court of Appeals basically granted that to them, granted the government's request to hold off on revoking the executive's orders until they have time to consider the request for a longer term and put it in front of Supreme Court. The interesting piece here was then the district court basically came in and they issued a decision, and it basically said that the IEEPA tariff is not a law providing for tariffs, and therefore the Court of International Trade does not have jurisdiction here, and granted the preliminary injunction for those two plaintiffs, so not all importers. But the district court then held off on issuing its order for 14 days. And where it's currently at right now is basically these 14 days allowing the government to file an appeals here. So it's pretty crazy. You have the Court of International Trade, then you have appeals, and then you have the district court weighing in on here. And basically where it's at is currently status quo right now, just like we were talking about, that these tariffs are still in motion. What is on pause is basically the Court of International Trade's ruling. So everything is status quo for the meantime. Now, I know the administration, if you were watching any of the, kind of talking heads on Sunday in terms of what's going on, Howard Lutnick was on Fox News on Sunday, and there were some key quotes here which were very interesting that he said. He goes, tariffs, quote unquote, are not going away. The president has so many other authorities that even in the weird and unusual circumstances where this was taken away, we just bring on another and another. So basically saying that these tariffs are not going away. Even if the court rulings go forward, they're going to figure out another way to take this and push these things through by other mechanisms that they have on here. So, this is kind of now in a speculative mode here, and we'll go through the Section 301s, 232s, where I think they may start directing these things, but you have to kind of put it into perspective on the political party that has the House and Congress. Republicans control the House and Senate, so they could easily fast track a bill in the case that the Court of International Trade withholds, and basically push those same tariffs through other legal actions and put them into law. So this is going to get really interesting. As Patrick alluded to, we got 5 weeks until the July 9th date. But on top of that, now we have this kind of several rulings out on these IEEPA tariffs. Are they legal? Are they not legal? And are they going to go into other motions across the board here?
Thank you, Shane. Thank you.
Yep.
Very thorough. So where are we today? Let's start with China. So China is sitting at 30% on imports, and that was from May the 14th. Remember, we had that escalation, that trade war in the making. That was de-escalated. There was a 3-month pause, and that was around May the 14th, where we settled on 30%. So that's 10% baseline, 20% fentanyl. Okay, 30%. Section 301 remain fully in effect, and they're stackable. Okay, so Craig Wheeler, your question around 301, is it in addition? The answer is yes. So if you were sitting at 12% on your product, your Section 301 product, now you have the 12% plus the 10 plus the 20. So you're what's that? You're at 42% for that particular example. And then, of course, the other big one, which I think is actually even more significant, is the duty-free de minimis 800 threshold eliminated for goods from China and Hong Kong. That started back in May. We're over a month now into that. So no more $800 de minimis for goods originating from China or Hong Kong. Remember, it can pass through any country in the world. Before it gets to the US, it is still made in China. If it was constructed, assembled, smelted in China, then it was made in China. That de minimis rule applies to those particular shipments, regardless of which port they come through from. Canada and Mexico, we've bundled them together. USMCA compliant goods, 0%. Non-USMCA are at 25%. So that is the current situation with Canada and and Mexico. So general tariffs, EU, EMEA, APAC. We've got a whole list here. Many of these you're familiar with. 25% on aluminum, effective though in 2 days' time. That goes up to 50%. So that is of great concern to aluminum derivatives, steel manufacturers importing into the US. There was a question from Linda on that. So yes, the 4th of June, that is still in place, but who knows? Things can change, right? 25% on automobiles, that was effective back in April. 25% on countries who buy oil or gas from Venezuela. Again, that was an April ruling. 10% of all countries, that's the baseline, remember? It's applicable to all countries. And then we have the reciprocal tariffs, the various reciprocal tariffs. We know the UK were in the White House. They're negotiating a deal around steel and aluminium. I've actually just been in Australia. The tariff news revolves around steel and aluminium in Australia. That's a big export from that part of the world into the US. So they're following that very, very closely. And then we saw Trump was a little upset with the progress being made with the European Union and threatened a 50% on European Union goods. We'll see. But remember, we do have 5 weeks, and anything can change, right? Anything can change in 5 days, let alone 5 weeks. So we'll follow it very carefully, and obviously be bringing you the updates each week. Reciprocals, let's not forget those. China fought back 10% on US imports, and Canada, of course, the most significant fight back, has put 25% on various goods from the US going north. Now, I know, Shane, you wanted to break down these trade measures that have because it can become a little confusing. You're going to take us through that now?
Yeah, and I think I wanted to do this just because we're getting it's getting thrown out there in relation to IEEPA and why is the court looking at these rulings differently? And if you're following the news, the Wall Street Journal, International Trade Today, et cetera, they're always bringing up other trade measures, and the other two common are Section 232 here and Section 301. So I'm just going to quickly break these down, and this is a tool for everybody. Again, you can download our you can download our deck after and have these at hand. But really, Section 232 here, the whole purpose of Section 232 tariffs is they address imports that threaten national security. That's the big piece on why it's here. The process, though, and I think the key process, we'll talk about the process because that's key towards the whole IEEPA tariffs, is there is a process in which to get 232 tariffs in play. The Department of Commerce basically investigates whether those imports pose a national threat. If a threat's found, the president can impose those tariffs quotas, and they consult with Congress and stakeholders. Linda, back to your question on steel and aluminum, this is a perfect example because steel and aluminum fall under Section 232. So the scope here is narrow. It does go through the Department of Commerce. It does go through consulting with Congress, et cetera. So Section 301 here, now the most common instance of Section 301 is dating back to 2018 when President Trump's first administration here. So these are basically to address unfair trade practices by foreign countries, intellectual property, forced technology transfers, et cetera. Again, process here, the U.S. Trade Representatives investigates these trade practices. If violations are then found, the president can impose the tariffs, quotas, or other measures to negotiate. So again, it goes through this sort of formalized process here. The examples, as I kind of mentioned, really the most common ones are around that 2018 on Chinese goods. And it really ranges from around 7.5% all the way up to 100% here. But again, scope here is also narrow. It targets specific countries or products linked to unfair practices. Now, the IEEPA ones, why these are under such scrutiny here is basically the purpose of these coming into play was to address national emergencies, economic security, originating outside of the U.S. And the process here, if you heard me talk about the other ones, the process here is basically the president declares a national emergency and grants broad authority to impose these economic measures. So there's no formal investigation that's required. There's no discretionary. There's nothing that goes in front of Congress. And that's what was happening a lot with on this court case with the Court of International Trade. So again, you now have these IEEPA tariffs on Canada, 25%, the 30% with Mexico, or excuse me, with China, et cetera. So the scope here is extremely broad, but there's a lot of controversy here. Again, legal challenges are arguing that basically these IEEPA tariffs don't, explicitly authorize the president to enact these things. So this is really going to be interesting, and this is why it's in such the crosshairs with the courts, because Section 232 and Section 301, they go through formalized processes with different through Congress, et cetera. IEEPA is just basically left up to the president to basically announce these things across. So thought this would be a good thing today just to kind of go through these two pieces here. And if IEEPA does get shut down again, that doesn't impact Section 232 because that's gone through its appropriate process to be enacted. Again, with the steel, aluminum is the biggest example here. So just touching on de minimis again, the volume of de minimis and why this was enacted, again, was all based around safety, fentanyl, other Chinese marketplaces, bringing goods into the U.S. With limited regulation. Where we're currently at right here now is that anything under $800, if it's going through postal, 54% of the value, or $100 per package. If non-postal, all regular applicable duties are part of that. Now, since Patrick and I were last on, the president put through the Big Beautiful Bill Act that went through. If you read any of that, one of the key pieces here was that de minimis would be removed entirely prior to July 1st, 2027. So this is another topic that we're going to closely watch because it's basically saying full removal. Now, I believe this did pass Congress. It's in front of House right now to review. But just kind of off the heels of that, there was just another bill that was announced the other day in relation to another bipartisan bill on May 22nd, also now in front of Congress, basically saying remove de minimis for all countries. So again, there's now umpteen bills that are currently out there right now, bipartisan support, all about the removal of de minimis.
Yep.
So Patrick, we just went through de minimis, all of tariffs, et cetera. Can you break this down?
Yeah. So, we commonly get asked, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of things for us to think about. Can you just sort of break it down into sort of simple pieces? And we have done. We've got 4 pieces of the global trade jigsaw. And these are, there's a number of things to keep in mind, but these are the 4 main ones that you've got to, you must consider. So very first, just as Shane was mentioning, the de minimis exceptions. The de minimis threshold of the country that you're shipping to. Here in the United States, we're all very familiar with the 800, except China and Hong Kong. That's down to 0. But any countries have got different de minimis thresholds, and you need to be aware of those. You need to know when your product that you're importing into that country triggers the threshold, and when duty and tax is therefore calculated. Country of origin. Super important, because that, as we know here in the United States, that has an impact on the duties that you're paying for that particular product when it enters into the country. Different countries of origins have different duty rates. And so you must be aware of where the country of origin of your particular product that you're importing into the United States, you must be aware of where it was made, and because that triggers the duty tax calculations. Your HS code. So you know your de minimis, you know your country of origin. What is the HS code, the tariff code classification of your product? Because again, that is directly linked to the amount of duty that is to be paid on that particular product. There are about 20,000 tariff code classifications in the US, in every country for that matter. So your products will be one of those 20,000. It is crucial that you know which one it is, because it links directly. You cannot misclassify. You just can't do that. You've got to classify your products accurately, because it is linked, therefore, to a duty and tax calculation. And of course, your declared value. Your declared value is very important for the de minimis threshold that we mentioned earlier on, but then also the percentage of duty is applied to that declared value. Your declared value must be accurate. You can't be under declaring, because that's evasion, and that is against the law. That has consequences. And of course, you don't want to be over declaring the value of your product, because that's just bad business. So knowing the exact declared value of your product is super important. Add those 4 ingredients, and then you have the cocktail of global trade. You must be aware. You must be aware as an importer or an exporter of all those 4. Shane?
Yeah, and all those variables together you need in order to determine the applicable duty rate here. So, we're not going to go through this one much. I think, the point here being that the CBP continues to push out new information in relation to the inspection and enforcement, continues to be on the rise. I did check this. This is pretty interesting. Last night, that total duties, taxes, and fees collected year to date is $82 billion. Now, year to date, I mean the latest being January through April, the end of April, $82 billion. Let's put that into perspective here. Full year 2024, it was $88 billion. So within those 4 months, we're already 93% of the way there in terms of the amount collected for total duties, taxes, and fees collected. So these are stats that CBP is constantly issuing. They do it every 15 to 30 days here. This one was just released last night. So again, 82 billion collected just through those 4 months versus 88 billion through all of 2024. So I imagine that's going to continue to increase and potentially accelerate as long as if these additional tariffs and higher rates come into play here. So, business reacting the tariff turmoil, as we've always mentioned, we're trying to bring new stories in here that's hitting the market. The CEO of Macy's basically came out and said that they're going to be looking at some prices that they're going to be raising or potentially stop carrying certain items. You see the increase of bookings and container ships from China I just looked earlier today, Patrick, the spot rate was up 17% on a container from China to the port of LA versus the same time last week. So again, those are continuing to rise just based upon the demand. With 5 weeks left until July 9th, everybody's trying to get their things into the States before back to school, before Christmas, and before they know what's going to actually happen with these tariffs. So there's some other pieces here. You know, we mentioned the whole John Deere piece. There's other earnings coming out stating how they're being impacted by these tariffs as well. You know, we want to talk about, you know, the proactive steps here. And if you know, we go through these every week, but I just want us to think what we just talked about here. There continues to be whiplash across the board, and you continue to need data in order to get the applicable duties right. So you need to keep exploring diversification across your carriers, other sources of the supply chain based upon what may or may not happen on July 9th. Automate global trade compliance. You don't have to do this alone. There's other tools out there that can help you with the way information is changing hourly. These tools can help you do that. Work with customs broker, lean on trade attorneys to make sure everything is in compliance. Product details. We went through kind of the 4 horsemen of trade we mentioned there. Understanding what your declared value is, understanding what your country of origin is, understanding what your HS classification code is. These are all the things that enable you to understand the duty rate, what your next decision should be. And then obviously that we're seeing, you know, 17% spot rate on containers coming through, build inventory and absorb these short-term headwinds now, bringing these in. So again, Avalara can help on several of these pieces, specifically number 2 and number 4 here. But let's go to our poll that we normally do. We're not going to go through the week over week results, but we just want to understand, are you planning to adjust your supply chain due to impending global trade changes, duty tariffs, et cetera? We'll give this just a quick hit because we do have another poll that we want to go after this, but it's always interesting to see here what these changes are. And we've taken feedback. Multiple answers are allowed in this, so feel free to pick more than one as you begin thinking about these with 5 weeks left. And we'll give it just a couple more. All right, let's see what everybody selected here. So looks like diversifying suppliers and manufacturers. Number 1 here, switching to local suppliers. So again, in that supply realm, rethinking distribution strategies, investing in the new trade technologies and other. And I don't know. Well, I don't know is still continued to be the number 1 hitter, Patrick, since the first time we get this.
That's right, but it was over 50%. So if you go back a few weeks, Shane, it was over 50%. So that number's being eroded a little as people, you know, the new norm becomes the new norm and all the rest of it. And people are now figuring out what they're going to do. They're making decisions and taking action, it would suggest.
Yep, exactly. So, all right, let's go to this last poll question here. What are your plans for addressing the increased costs from global tariffs on your goods? Again, multiple choice here. We listen to the audience. Pass additional cost to the consumer, include surcharge, absorb cost, others. So again, this is a new one that we're putting out, trying to get some sense in terms of where is your head at in terms of how are you structuring your strategy as it comes to addressing the increased costs from these global tariffs on your goods. So we'll give it 5 seconds here. Let's see if we have any changes versus the prior weeks. All right. So majority of you are passing along additional costs to the consumer by raising item prices or including a tariff surcharge. That is not surprising. 16% of you are looking at absorbing the cost. That is interesting. I think let's take a look here and see how that fares compared to previous weeks. Looks to be a little bit less absorbing the cost. So that's actually coming down versus the prior trends that we saw. But still, including a tariff surcharge is now kind of the highest. You guys selected 50% and also passing those on. These are the same things that we're reading about daily in terms of what are folks going to be doing to basically ensure that their supply chain and their costs and margins still remain adequate. So we will continue to see and continue to ask these questions. And again, can your businesses keep up with these challenges? Last thing you want are penalties and fines for non-compliance, overcharging, undercharging your customers due due to inaccurate duties and taxes. You don't want added costs on from additional changes in your supply chain. And again, we've been doing this for the past 3.5 months now. You're not alone. 55%, even before all the tariff and change turmoil happened, responded that cross-border e-commerce is a very challenging environment. So, our normal piece here is, again, thinking about everything we mentioned. Things are changing at an hourly standpoint. You have the 4 horsemen, basically, of global trade. This is how Avalara can help. We can help understand the classification on those goods. Can those goods be sent? Do they have the applicable duty and tax rates on those? And what other duty rates, countervailing duties, anti-dumping, what other trade restrictions should be on those? So we have a whole host of tools here. Again, we want to make sure that you're being proactive and not being reactive to these things. 5 weeks away from July 9th, we want to make sure everybody is taking the applicable actions and making educated, well-informed decisions on what they're doing here. So we're going to go into a quick demo of our self-serve tool. Some good news here just before Regina goes into it. We've had great traction. Every week we've been offering a 5-day demo of this. Just due to the demand and some of the feedback, we've actually now increased it to 14 days. So Regina, would you mind just kicking this off to the demo so the folks can see here?
Welcome to the Avalara Tariff Content Classification Tool demo. Click to learn how this tool can accurately classify your products. First, choose the country of import. In our example, we will use the US. Click to proceed. Next, select the country of origin. In our example, we will use China. Click to proceed. Next, let's describe our product. Click to proceed. Now, we are ready to classify. Click to proceed. The tariff classification tool needs to know a few more details. Click to select the upper material. Select the lower material. Click to proceed. We've now reached an HS. Click to drill down to reach the HS10. Since our product is a men's golf shoe, click to drill down. Since our product is not welt footwear, click to drill down. We have reached the HS8. Click to find the HS10. We have now reached our HS10. Click to see rate description. Here we can see the total duty amount for this product. This totals 28.5% general rate plus 125% punitive rate, which equals 153.5%. This concludes the demo.
Great. And as I mentioned before, we do have a 14-day trial offer for those. So basically, we're going to go to the next screen here. If you select yes here, our team will get back to you by the end of this week with your applicable login credentials. And then your trial would start on this coming Monday, next Monday, and then run for 2 full weeks on that. So let's just go to that screen now. And it's really funny, Patrick, there's a lot of AI tools out there. Right. And somebody came to us the other day and they're like, hey, I see on this AI tool, white leather golf shoes, it should be, X percentage. I think it was close to nearing like 100% or so. We went through our tools, our content team, and it was the country of origin was China, destination was US, went through the whole pieces. It should be 47.5%. So you think about that, it's the 30% over what's currently in play now. And then adding on those stackables, as you mentioned, the 301s, most favored nation duties, et cetera. So just be wary. There's all these AI tools out there that are just popping up on duty rates. Using tools like ours, where we have, a content team of over 200 individuals paying attention to these rates. These are the most accurate they can have, with applicable GRIs also following those as well, and audit trails. And then, we always ask this: would you like to talk with the global expert about your global trade compliance? So again, if you could raise your hand, we'll make sure to get back to you within 24 hours on this piece.
Yeah, we have a team of cross-border experts who are waiting to get in touch with you to speak to you about your specific use case, because everybody's use case is different. We speak to Shane and I speak to customers day in, day out, and their requirements and the specifics of their supply chain are different. So whilst we try to be as general as possible on these webinars, the only way you're going to get sort of a detailed use case response is by raising your hand and having one of Shane's team contact you and talk you through your use case. So a few questions, Shane.
Yeah. So one here I like, will you be providing a cross-border solution services webinar? Well, if you raise your hand, I'd be even happy to do this as a one-on-one with this individual here. So please let me know and we can align something separately. That's a great idea to go through our cross-border solutions webinar. We'll let our team know about that. But in the meantime, instead of waiting, we'd be more than happy to jump on a call with you, walk through kind of our cross-border solutions in that regard. And then Melissa, next question, basically said here, if the 5-day trial had to be out, yes, absolutely. Please sign up. We'll reactivate your trial. And we know 5 days. This is why we extended it. We want people to take advantage of the trial that they have at hand here.
Jenna, you asked about Section 232, the steel, and can the president double it? Well, it would appear so. He plans to double it in 2 days' time. Will there be a legal pushback on this? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But as of now, it would appear that he has the authority to double it and is going ahead with it in 48 hours. So I hope that answers that question. Martha Luz, you asked about an item coming into the US from the EU, but had been made in China. And you wanted to know about which tariff would be applied and the de minimis rule. Well, it's the China de minimis rule that is applicable here. Yes, it was shipped from the EU, but it started its life as a product. It started its life in China. That's where it was made. That's where it was assembled. That's where it was smelted. It went to the EU, transshipped and came. So therefore, the 800 de minimis is applicable for that particular product. And the duty rate, which is the Section 301, whatever that may be for that product, plus the 10 baseline, plus the 20 fentanyl. So that's what you must consider for that particular product that is coming in from the EU.
Yep. Let me go through here. Melissa, again, Melissa, we'll reach out to you just to make sure you get those credentials. And then we have Randy. What countries are currently have de minimis in effect now? Basically, all markets. We actually have a resource on our webpage that actually gives de minimis by countries based upon imports. If you're talking about U.S. that doesn't have all countries coming into the U.S. are allowable de minimis, that $800 de minimis value right now, except for China. Now, go back though in terms of what we talked about here. There's several bills now in Congress and the House on removing that de minimis and lowering that de minimis threshold. So again, this is key. We're also seeing, I believe, in the UK, Patrick, I think 2 weeks ago, they're looking at doing something similar as well as reducing their de minimis threshold. Yeah,
it's, the actions taken by the US administration are forcing a lot of countries to look at their own rules. Some sort of curiously exploring their own rules, some taking action. So we can expect to see changes in de minimis around the world. As I mentioned right at the very beginning, every country has a de minimis, okay? And they're all at different levels, and they protect certain products within, the domestic interest of that particular country. So it's very confusing. De minimis values are very, very different across the world. And of course, as mentioned by Shane, we can help you with that. One thing though, Sherry, you asked about digital products, and let's touch on that for a little bit. The tariffs that we speak about week in, week out on this webinar, this is only for physical goods. Not yet does it apply to digital products. So if you're selling software, of course, you're still going to have to pay sales tax on imported software that's resold within the US, but there's no duties and tariffs, import duties and tariffs on those goods. And why? Because there's no actual border, right? There's to collect duties, you require a border. You require officials, CBP in the case of the US, to intercept things, inspect things, apply, calculate, collect. If you're sending software across borders, right? There's no border. So at the moment, we heard talk about movies. Whether that meant digital movies or whether it meant the actual filming sets, we're not sure. But it has been mentioned, but currently it's just on physical products.
Yep. And then I see one here. Craig, where's pricing found? Craig, we can reach out to you directly on that and walk you through, understand a little bit more. Mary, can paid duties and tariffs be reclaimed as an ITC credit? So I believe the ITC credit you mean is the input tax credit. This is something with everything changing on a daily basis. I would say something to connect with a broker or a trade attorney on, just to get full clarity there. Again, there's been a lot of changes on that front. And it's also going to depend upon which countries are involved, et cetera. So sorry, we don't have an answer right for you, but there's other specialties out there.
Anita, you asked about tariff surcharges and whether they're commissionable or not. Well, that'll come down to the arrangement between the buyer and the seller. We've seen a lot of customers are adding the tariff to the sale price of their products. That's what we're seeing. So it becomes part of the deal value, I guess. So in that case, there is you have a case, I suppose, to make that commissionable. But it really comes down. There's no laws on it. It's gonna come down to the agreement between the buyer and the seller, Anita. So it's how you handle that negotiation with the other party. That's the important part.
Yeah, Mark, on the tariffs applied to healthcare goods being used for research going UK to US, I don't know that off the top of my head here.
I would say at the moment, no. There doesn't seem to be relief on healthcare goods, especially if they're commercial. Now, if this was sort of a charitable endeavor, then there could be some relief there. But if it's not charitable and there's sort of commercial purpose behind the research, I would say no. There is still duties and taxes on healthcare products between the two countries. So it's looking likely that there will be duties on that.
Yeah. One here, if I sell a computer product originally manufactured in China, so country of origin China, imported, used within the United States to resell, you would have to pay the duties on that importing into the US, and then resell to Canada. Do tariffs apply? Yeah, and I believe this would be kind of a double hit here on importing it into the United States, and then if you're exporting it to Canada, $60 billion worth of goods, this would be part of it. So just based upon this limited information here, yes, the tariffs would be applied on that, and potentially by two separate countries, the U.S. and Canada.
That's right. Unless it was imported into the U.S. into a trade zone, then it's held. Technically, it's still airside or port side, but then it's re-exported from that duty-free zone into Canada. It never entered commercial circulation in the U.S. Then you wouldn't have to. But if you're bringing it in, adding some value, repackaging it, doing activities with it, and then exporting it out to a third country, then it's like Shane said, it's the double hit there. You're bringing it into one and then a second country.
I know we have 1 minute left here. I think we were able to get through most of these questions. I think just a reminder to everybody, we're continuing to keep up with all the blogs, resources, everything that we have. Please continue to leverage those. The other piece here is we want to make sure our listeners are educated. There's a lot of global trade terminology out there. If you download this deck, we actually put a global trade glossary together based a lot of common questions that we're getting here on a week-over-week basis. Section 232, 301, merchant of record, IEPA, etc. we put it on here for everybody to take a look at. So yeah, Regina, any closing remarks here?
Yes, thank you. Just a quick note on our upcoming webinars. We have, of course, Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. Of note, though, which is not written on here, but we will be moving the July, 8th, to the 10th to allow for talk of all of the changes that'll be happening on the 9th. So just kind of keep that in your minds. But we do have Trade and Tariff Tuesdays happening. We have on the 12th, HS Codes 101, and then on the 26th, 2025 tax changes. So that may be of interest. And then just to close us out, you'll receive a post-event email later today with a link back to this console where you can access the recording, the slide deck, and additional resources. And we hope you can join us again next week as we continue our weekly webinar series. That post-event email is going to have instructions on how to register for upcoming sessions, which I think everyone is sort of pros at by this point. And thank you for joining. This concludes today's webinar.